I write this to you from an internet cafe. It's certainly been a while since I've even been near a computer. The air is also much more unclean, polluted. I would guess so. Anyways, I would rather not disclose who I am. I changed my name and identity because I was absent for too long. Well, not exactly. I have aged, but almost no time has passed since I left. I feel like I should tell my story, even though it is completely unbelievable. I don't think that you even understand what I just said pertaining to the time dilation. I don't either, to be honest. Now, where do I begin? I was, a simple guy. I had a mundane life, was a little introverted, and studied engineering. I had a knack for putting things together, loved to pull things apart to see how they work ever since I was young. But I also loved nature, and I still do. Where I lived, there was a forest nearby, as well as a small mountain. I used to take hikes and wander around for hours at a time. It was like a catharsis after a long day of work. I was still attending college. I remember it was a sunny day. I decided to go on a hiking trip toward the mountain. The summer heat didn't stop me from walking up those paths. The trees gave me shade, though. The sunstroke was not an immediate issue at the time. I brought a few bottles of water and a few snacks so that I could eat and, take a break. I also knew the paths well, so it was impossible for me to get lost. Yet, in spite of the fact I managed to get lost, I was daydreaming when I noticed I managed to get off the trail and I hiked into the woods. It was getting late, so I tried to get out of the woods or orient myself to get back to the path, but to no avail. I was desperately trying to get out, trying to call someone on my phone even. There was no reception at all. I knew there were no cave systems in the area, nor any real caves to be honest, but I managed to find one. It started raining, so I took shelter inside of the small opening. The cave only went on for about 10 meters long, if even that. I managed to get inside, and it wasn't dark. I actually could see really well in there. But I didn't see the ledge behind the spot that I sat down in. As I leaned back trying to relax while I waited for the rain to stop, I fell. And that wasn't a small drop. I fell for what felt like a dozen meters, only to hit a soft surface. As I regained my composure, I opened my eyes only to see that I landed on a thick moss. It didn't look like anything I had ever seen before. It was thick and soft, enough to soften my fall so that I didn't get hurt too much. I did feel sore and I had a few cuts from the rock scraping during my not so graceful fall, and I looked up to see the opening from which I emerged, only to see a pitch black hole above me. I got up from the soft moss and I looked forward. Another opening. Another opening. No, that's not possible, I muttered to myself as I saw light from what appeared to be an entrance to the cave where I now lay. I should be underground, I told myself as I got up. I could smell ozone as if there were no rain. Well, I shouldn't because I was underground, but I wasn't? It is really confusing. I trotted toward the opening, and I was blinded by the sun for a few moments. A clear sky. A clear, purple sky. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I looked toward the forest in front of me. The grass had a reddish hue alongside the leaves on the trees. These trees were completely alien to me. They were tall and looked more like mushrooms. But there was no mistaking it. They were trees. They had branches and leaves on them. I started walking forward, unable to comprehend what the hell I was looking at. Was I in a coma? I thought to myself. No, this must not be real. I'm dreaming. I pinched myself as sure as hell I felt the pain. I slapped myself for a few times for good measure, and I wasn't waking up. How hard did I hit my head? And I even thought that I could have died. But it all felt real. The sights and even the sounds were just all foreign to me. I heard some kind of chirping, but it sounded more like high-pitched wailing. I walked in a daze for God knows how long. It soon started to become dark, and I decided to pick up some sticks and try to light a fire. I had a lighter with me, so it shouldn't be that difficult. I went around searching for some dry sticks when I heard some kind of noise just above the trees, shuffling in the leaves. I thought at first it must be the wind, but then a creature that resembled a monkey emerged, dangling from a thick branch on a tree that was quite distant from me. It was near enough I could discern its features though. It was hairless with skin as white as snow. It had 4 black eyes and 4 arms with 2 legs. On each arm and on both of its legs it had 5 fingers. We were both motionless. We were in some sort of staring contest. The creature blinked with 2 eyes on the top, and then the bottom 2 started blinking as well, making some sort of shrieking noise, and then it disappeared into the tree above. I was completely shocked. I thought it ran away from me. I thought it saw me as some threat. But it wasn't me that it was scared of. It was something much, much worse. I could hear growling from behind me. I slowly turned around to see a massive beast of a creature. It also had 4 eyes, but this one had black fur. Its teeth had 2 rows and its saliva dripped onto the red grass below. It looked like an oversized alien bear, and it looked hungry. I backed away slowly, making careful steps as to not trip. Then the beast started running towards me, roaring just like a bear, but if that bear had smoked every day for most of its life. A deep guttural sound that was, it's still ingrained to my memory to this day. I turned and ran, not looking back. I went in a zigzag pattern between the trees in order to lose the monstrosity, but it kept up with me. As I ran, I felt like I was making more distance between the creature and myself. As I thought I was escaping, I tripped on a large rock and fell face first into the grass like a horror movie cliche. I turned around to see where the bear thing was. It was still barreling towards me. I picked up the rock I tripped on so I could throw it into the oncoming monster. To the horror, an eye opened up on the rock and it looked straight at me. An eye on the rock. I screamed and I threw the rock towards the 4-eyed bear. To my surprise, the rock excreted some kind of liquid that quickly turned into some gas substance. It distracted the bear, and from the looks of it, the gas irritated its eyes. I looked around quickly. I didn't know where to go. I remember I had a small pocket knife in my backpack. I quickly managed to get it out and open it, and I hid behind it. I kept silent. The bear thing recovered, but it didn't seem to have the will to find me. I heard its heavy footsteps fade into the distance. Once I couldn't hear them, I looked at where the bear was. I saw the rock, its eye opening once again. I looked around, and after a few moments, its locked eye locked on me. Then suddenly, at least a dozen insect-like legs grew from its body and it scurried off into the forest, not breaking eye contact with me. I shuddered at the fact that I actually held that thing in my hands. After that friendly encounter with the local wildlife, I decided to be more careful from there on. I managed to collect a few sticks and a few rocks as to not start a forest fire. And of course poking them with my knife or a long stick to see if they were alive. I don't want any more of that happening. A few of them were. Like before, they scurried off like cockroaches as the first one I encountered. But most, thankfully, were not little creatures. I managed to get a fire going. As the night crept in, it became a lot colder. During the day it was a bit fresh, but not chilly or cold. I definitely wasn't dressed for the occasion. I had shorts and a thin short sleeve shirt on. Back home it was scorching hot, as I said. During the night, I could barely sleep. I slept 2 hours tops. The sound in the forest were surreal, terrifying. I still had to come to grips that I was not home. I was literally thrown into the unknown. You can probably say that I accidentally threw myself into the unknown, but it's besides the point. I managed to survive a few days until I ran out of snacks. I rationed them. I managed to find a stream of drinkable water so I could refill my bottles. Food was the main problem. I did find some berries, but I didn't want to risk it just yet. Other than the weird berries, I found other strange plant life, as well as wild animals. I found some sort of flower that emitted a toxin. Which attracted the rock things. I couldn't tell you the purpose of it. It was there. Then there were spiky plants. I know we have those back at home, but these had spikes which thrusted themselves into an unlucky animal that happened to come close enough. It would thrust its spikes into the animal and it would inject some kind of venom which would paralyze the animal. Then roots would grow towards the animal at great speed and then it would just drag it underground. That's a horrifying death. The first time I saw it in action, the unlucky animal was some sort of rabbit or jackalope, something. Slightly larger and with 4 eyes and long ears, but it looked harmless. I thought of hunting one of those jackalope things since they were quite common. I tried and I failed. I had no ranged weapons and those guys had a sixth sense, it seems. As soon as I even thought of an aggressive move toward the thing, it would just go away fast. So there was no hope of trying to catch the thing. Soon enough, I became very hungry. I was starving, actually. At some points, I remember running away from some sort of predator. Barely. The thing was on 2 legs with a snout and 2 pure black eyes. It was slower than me, thankfully, so I managed to outrun and hide. And I can't tell you the details of how it looked other than the general description I just kind of gave you. Exhausted and hungry, I decided to test my luck on those berries. I picked the orange ones. They were slightly larger than the others, and I ate one, waited for a bit. Thankfully, nothing happened. Then I ate almost the entire bush that they grew on. They were kind of like plums and had a sweet taste, and I felt full for once. Then, after about an hour, I felt dizzy. Then I felt sick, and my head was spinning. I could barely walk. I would remember walking, then seemingly going unconscious just to wake up in the middle of doing something. Like that entire time in between, I don't remember. Once I was just punching a tree. Other times I would just be laying on the floor, having a staring contest with one of those rock things. The rest I don't remember. It is just lost. I woke up with a fever after God knows how long. But I wasn't on the forest floor, I was indoors. It was a house. Well, more of like a hut. I was on a bed of furs with a towel on my forehead. I felt like I was run over by a bus. My head was aching and I felt sick. But I wasn't in a state of delirium. I looked around and I saw there were things in the hut. A bow and quiver with some arrows, small wooden plates of sort, and other things you would find in a primitive hut. There was a sword made of iron or something from what I can recall. After a few moments, what appeared as a woman entered the hut. She was short from what I saw, with the long white hair and red eyes. Looked like an albino woman, but it looked, I don't know, normal? I was probably still out of my mind at the time, so I'm not really surprised. She rushed toward me and knelt down, telling me something in a language I didn't understand. She removed the towel and put her hand on my forehead. I do remember saying something. Of course she didn't understand, but I'm pretty sure if she did, it probably didn't make any sense. I passed out again there shortly after. After some time I woke up again. This time I felt better. A bit sore, but I was back to my normal self. Beside me was a small plate with food and some wooden utensils. The meal was a combination of fruits and meat. The combination wasn't the best, but, it satisfied my hunger. After eating the meal, I laid down again thinking about what happened. First thing, the orange ones I had are like a drug, at least when consumed in large quantities. Second, there are actually people here. I was still confused as to how I found myself here, but I first have to find a way to survive here in order to figure out where I am. After some time passed, a person entered the hut. This time it was a man. He had white hair that stretched halfway down to his shoulders, red eyes, and a thick white beard. He was about my height. He came to the side and sat on the floor. He pointed at the plate and said something along the lines of,
Ut elo est.
I couldn't understand him, but I presumed he told me that the meal was good. I assumed, so I just simply nodded. Do you understand me? Do you speak English? I said to him.
Ik nai remem ki tik zak.
He said with a confused expression on his face. I tried communicating with him, but to no avail. Others joined him to try to talk to me, including the young woman who I first saw when I was high off those berries. About 4 people were asking me these questions. They started pointing to things. The young woman started by picking up a spoon and saying,
Spanutella.
I repeated what it was called in English. After a while, I just pointed at myself and said my name. Ray. Ray. The people around me started introducing themselves. The young woman's name was Tanya. The bearded man's name was Michael. From what I gathered, the Michael is a close relative of Tanya. Later that day, I went out of the hut. There was an entire village of around 50 people at most. All had white hair and red eyes. It was a peculiar sight. Although, I think I was an even weirder sight since I had brown eyes and dark brown hair. After a while of going around the village alongside Michael and Tanya, both of them pointed at things after telling me how they are called in their language and me repeating in English. I had a basic vocabulary of their language, though of course I couldn't communicate with them still. It helped a lot. And a lot of the words are surprisingly quite similar or identical to those in English. I was surprised and thankful that the locals seemed to take great care of me, showing me around the village and teaching me their language. They probably weren't cannibals, hopefully. As it became dark, I was introduced to what I assumed was the village elder. He was an old man in the biggest hut in the village. He was bald with only a few strands of white hair and he had the same red eyes. I was told to take a seat opposite him. Then I was left alone with the old man. He looked me over, then got up with the help of his cane. He motioned to me that I remain seated on the floor. He grabbed a small jar containing some grayish powder, and he carefully made a circle around me with the powder. He sat down opposite me and had a short chant. The powder around me lit up, and the color started turning into a snow white. I apologize. I am impatient and can't really wait for you to learn our tongue, the old man said in perfect English. What? You speak English? I said, quite surprised. No, the man shook his head. I had heard of it, but I had never learned it. This spell will only last so long. I will ask you some questions, then you can ask me your questions. Alright, go on. Where are you from? The old man leaned in and squinted his eyes, awaiting my answer. I answered to the best of my ability, where I am from and how I got here. I see your name is Ray, yes? I nodded. Alright. I have met one of your kind before, a long time ago. It was a rare event, a thing of legends. Look, I don't know how I got myself into this, but can you explain to me exactly where I am? The old man considered my question for a moment, then answered. Ray, there are many names for this place. but to my village it is known as New Home. In your world, it's called Old Home. I took a minute to think about what he said. You mean you come from where I come from? A very long time ago, yes. And there are others like you? Yes and no. There are other villages, but farther out, I've seen people that look similar to you. They are newcomers. Okay. I was a bit overwhelmed, but I had one more pressing question on my mind. What is the name of all that is holy? Are those rock insects? The old man chuckled a bit before answering. Oh, they are the eyes of the forest. Don't be bothered by them. They are harmless unless you harm them. Even if you do, you would have to be worried about the goddess's wrath. Instead, more of them harming you. Goddess? I asked. Platia is the goddess of the forest. She is our protector. As long as you don't harm the forest, she will not harm you. So I just simply nodded. The spell is going to be done soon. Any other questions? Yes, what is the name of this village? And your name as well, so I know. I am the Elder Ashtar of the Zion village. After that, the powder around me turned black. The old man Ashtar motioned for me to stand up and exit, and I did. Outside, Michael was waiting for me, and he showed me to the hut where I was originally placed. This will be my home for the time being as it stands. Days went by, and those days turned into months. I slowly learned more and more of their language, and I also started working with the villagers. They taught me how to use the bow and arrow, and I joined them on their hunts, and I made new friends. I also got to that life. I got used to the life amongst these strange people. They worship the forest, and her protector is named Platia. I learned that she could look like a fox with 9 tails, or a fluor-eyed fox. Her human form is that of a short woman with long black hair and, of course, red eyes. Platia blessed us in this hunt, Michael said as he had the rabbit or jackalope animal that I learned they called sets. So that's what they're called over here, sets. And he slung it over his shoulder. It was indeed. Even if you were able to kill something today, Ray, Michael's younger brother Chris said to me as he dragged a deer-like creature called Kalopa with my help. Yeah, it was quite a hunt, I said casually. As the group finally got to the village, a small crowd awaited us. The last few hunting expeditions were not as successful, but now we were able to bring enough to feed the village for the time being. 5 deer, 20 rabbits, and a few other small critters. You're back! Shouted Tanya as she ran toward us. She hugged Michael and Chris, and then finally me. She was slightly younger than me. I was in my mid-20s at the time, and she was in her early 20s, I think. Finally, a proper meal will be had, someone said from the crowd. Was anyone hurt? Did you get attacked by the Kryptos? Tanya said. Kryptos was the bear thing that attacked me on the first day when I came here. No, all was well, I said. We were not harassed, fortunately enough, Michael added. Thanks, Platia. I will go help prepare. You boys deserve a hearty meal, Tanya said, as she went to help the others hang up the animals and skin them. I slowly began to accept this lifestyle. I actually liked it here. Life was simple. Even if it had some layers I didn't yet understand. Then one day, some of my neighbors and a good friend got into a fight with the residents of a nearby village. There was something about them breaching our hunting grounds. The debate got heated and one of them shot an arrow at Michael. I was not present at the time that it happened. I was helping around the village at the time. I worried that this would escalate, but I was told these things sometimes happen and I shouldn't worry about it. Michael was wounded and was still recovering when him and I were woken up in the middle of the night to screams and shouts. Despite still being in pain, he ran out to see what was happening and I was right behind him. We saw two of the huts set ablaze and unknown faces cutting down our friends and family. We fought. I killed one of them. I had no time to process the fact that I took someone's life. It was self-defense after all, and I still had more problems to worry about. We were outnumbered. I saw as Old Man Astor helplessly swatted at the men as they plunged their spears into him. "Ray, get Tanya and go. I'll hold them off," Michael shouted at me. Tanya stood behind us with tears in her eyes. "Michael, you're coming with us. We can't escape." I was cut short as an arrow went through Michael's throat and Tanya screamed. Michael fell to his knees with a panicked look in his eyes, gurgling on his own blood, and he pointed towards the forest. He then fell face first on the floor and remained motionless. I took Tanya by the arm and ran, and we ran and ran and ran. She insisted on going back. I couldn't imagine how she felt. I had tears in my eyes, and I stopped and I looked at her. I grabbed her by the shoulders. "Tanya, we can't go back. No, back. If we will die if we do." I desperately tried to tell her. I then saw torches in the distance. I grabbed her hand and just kept running through the dark forest. Arrows flew around us. I was struck in the shoulder, but I kept running. Then Tanya was struck in the leg. She fell. She took a quick glance at where the arrow struck her. There was no way she could walk, let alone run. I tried to pick her up and carry her. "Ray, leave me. I will slow you down." She was hitting me and pushing herself away from me. "No, I'm not leaving you, damn it," I shouted. "Leave me. Go," she screamed away, pushing herself and nearly toppling me over. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," I repeated to myself as I ran. I ran alone now. I looked back in the distance as the men got to Tanya. She looked at me as they grabbed her by her hair and put a blade to her neck. I saw red, and then I turned and just continued running. After I escaped, I managed to get the arrow out of myself and tend to the wound as best as I could. I learned which herbs were best for preventing illness, and a plant which acted as a disinfectant. I survived, but the guilt I carry is great. I considered ending it, but I knew that her death would then be all in vain. I decided to live and explore this strange new world. Months passed, yet I stumbled upon new villages, new peoples, and faces. I didn't stick around. I would just stay for a few days and trade, then continue. The forest seemed to have no end. For months on end, I traveled through it. Thought I was going in circles. But the new villages and new people I met along the way told me otherwise. Most people of the forest were friendly, if weary of strangers, especially ones like myself who didn't look like them. Some are outright hostile and refuse anyone who approaches their territory. I found new animals and plants, great rivers. I followed that and it brought me to new sights. I saw a waterfall that probably rivaled Niagara Falls. I saw strange flying pieces of land that floated just below the clouds. Massive, reptile-like creatures that resembled dinosaurs. Very similar but distinctly different in a special way. And a lot of living rocks. It was strangely beautiful in a way. Nearly a year passed of me wandering the forest and I came upon the beach, an ocean. I was slightly proud of myself that I managed to get this far. I decided to follow the beach, occasionally going onto the forest in order to gather supplies and food. I went for a better part of 2 months following the beach. I finally stumbled upon a place that I hoped I could call home. The tall walls promised safety. A city. A gleam of hope and civilization. Order order in a chaotic world. The tall wall that greeted me was made of stone. It reminded me of a medieval city. I still wore my old hiking sneakers, though they were now slowly falling apart, and I had a thick deer fur around me to keep me warm. My beard and hair grew enough so that I basically looked like a caveman that emerged from the forest. As I approached a large field where farmland stretched as far as the eye could see, I took a small path toward one of the entrances to the city. I had a large stick that acted as a cane of sorts, which aided my aching legs. I had walked nonstop for a few days already. I was way too tired and I hardly noticed the weird looks I got from the farmers who were working in the fields around me. As I came upon the entrance, I saw that the wall was much taller than I expected. It rivaled the stories I heard of ancient walls that once stood proud and strong back home. I did see in the future some black smoke going into the air, and I was presumed it was for heating, but then again, why would you heat something in the middle of such a warm day? A guard approached me. He was dressed in chainmail armor and helmet that resembled those of the Roman era, but surprisingly what looked like a rifle slung over his shoulder. He approached me calmly. I could see that he had purple eyes, and it was quite a strange sight. He spoke to me in a foreign language. I was not surprised in the least, since the distance I made in the last few months is not in the least small. It felt as if this world was much larger than Earth. I spoke to the guard in English, and after that failed, I attempted the language I learned in the last year in the village. I thought it would not work, but surprisingly the guard turned and called someone down. I saw a younger guard come out. I saw another guard come out. This one was much younger than the purple-eyed one in front of me. In the younger one I could see those familiar red eyes of those of the last village. The purple-eyed guard said something to the red one, and then the purple-eyed guard said something to the red-eyed guard, and then the red-eyed one spoke. He asks, "Who are you and what brought you here?" I didn't speak for a few moments, thinking of a response. "I came from the forest. I don't know that there will be a large settlement here. I just stumbled upon it." The red-eyed guard presumably translated what I said. After that, he told something to the red-eyed one and quickly entered the city. "You know my language, but your eyes are not red." "You know my language, but your eyes are not red," the young guard said to me. "I am not sure how I got here, to be honest with you. I was saved by one of your people's villages, and I lived with them for a few months, learning the language. Unfortunately, the village was attacked and destroyed. I managed to escape. I don't know if there were any other survivors." I answered to the young guard who stood there, his eyes wide. "The village was attacked? By who? Tell me!" he almost screamed at me. I was taken aback by his reaction. I thought that conflict between his people was common. "I think it is the neighboring village. I'm not sure. There was a dispute in hunting territory or something." The guard looked down at the ground for a moment, and then he said calmly, "What do you remember when you came here?" I thought back to the first memory I had when I came to this strange place. "I fell, found myself in a cave. I'm not sure you'll believe me, but I am not from around here." The guard's eyes went wide again. "Wait, brown eyes, cave, by Plataea?" He ran toward the city entrance. He nearly hit the purple-eyed guard who was just returning. He started speaking quickly in a language I couldn't understand, explaining something to the other guard. The purple-eyed guard nodded to what he said and motioned to me that I may enter, and I followed him. And once I entered the city, I could hear the sound of straining metal and an outburst of steam from one of the pipes protruding out of the wall. The gates were closing. I followed the guard further into the city, and I saw many people going about their day. The streets were filled with vendors and salesmen. The house was not the same. The houses were not so much houses as they were apartments built made of brick and stone, some more decorated than others. I saw the smokestacks from which the black smoke came from. I could hear the distant sound of roaring steam engines from the inside of the large building we had just passed. The purple-eyed guard stopped next to me in what looked like an inn or a hotel. He knocked on the door and waited, and a small slit opened up on the metal door and a pair of eyes could be seen. The two went back and forth for a minute before the door opened. The guard motioned me to enter. Behind the door was a smaller man with purple eyes. Most of the inhabitants had purple eyes, though I could see some of the people with green, blue, and red and contrasting colors of hair. It was quite a sight. I presumed it signified lineage or, a rank. The guard gave the man some coins, and he had some parting words with the tall man, after which he closed the door and locked it. He then led me into a room that was upstairs. He motioned me to enter the room. The room had a desk and a chair and quite a comfy looking bed. I got my backpack on the floor when the man closed the door behind me and locked it from the outside. I banged on the door for a few minutes, but there was no way I'm breaking down that door. I accepted my fate this time. I was simply too tired to fight back in the moment. Months of just straight walking after the horrors I had seen. I was tired. Probably hopeless. I laid on the bed. It was not as soft as the one back home, but it was a huge upgrade from the cold, hard ground I had been sleeping on. After about an hour, the door unlocked, and a woman entered with a plate of food. She left the plate and left, locking the door behind her. If they're going to feed me, I can stay here for a while. I can plan my escape when I gather my strength back. If it will be necessary, that is. The food was marvelous. It was maybe my hunger, but it was truly good quality food. After eating and feeling full, I just fell asleep, only to be woken by the door being unlocked again. This time 2 different guards were waiting on the other side. They grabbed me and dragged me out. I shouted in protest and was met by a rifle barrel pointed to my head. I was silent from then on. They led me back onto the streets and dragged me into a carriage. I was forcibly sat into the vehicle, and the teal bulky guards sat down on both of my sides. Another 2 were opposite of myself. The carriage ride lasted about 15 minutes before we stopped. Then I was dragged out and put onto my feet at gunpoint. In front of me looked like akin to a small mansion, but built in like a Greek style. I was escorted inside, where I was treated less harshly. We walked through the endless halls. I saw men and women in white robes with some purple on them. Nobles, I would guess, and they stared at me with pity or disgust, or even both. I was finally in front of a large door. One of the guards knocked on the door, and a voice could be heard from behind it. The 2 guards opened the large double doors, and I was pushed inside as the doors closed behind me again. "No, piss off," I shouted at the man who threw me inside. "Oh, there will be no need for learning something new today. A shame," a raspy voice said in English. I stood up. "Who are you?" "I am the king of this fine city, as well as its founder," the raspy voice responded. I could see a large desk at which the man sat in front of, and he had green eyes. Seemed to be very old. "God damn it, what is with your men? They're gonna treat me as if I'm a guest or prisoner. Can't they choose one?" I said in protest. A laugh could be heard. "I don't mind the brutes. My name is Trost II. I am the founder of the Novus Troia. May I have your name and title?" "My name is Ray, and I have no title. Unless you think of like my surname, that would be Aaron. Ray Aaron." Ray Aaron. "Do you wish to live here?" "It would be great, but the first impression's not good, I'll have to admit." And how can you speak English? I learned the English tongue less than 100 years ago. The 3,160 years since this city's foundation. A large boat made of iron and steel happened to stumble upon your city. We helped the crew, and in return they helped us. They taught us the scientific method, as you call it. That is why you see the great power of steam on display throughout Nova Troya. They spoke English? But, wait. Did you say 3,100 years after? And you are the founder? And that was supposedly 100 years ago? The mortal sees. He raised his hand into the air and then lowered them back down on his desk. I have a mission to lead my people to glory that was long lost, and the faraway people of your kind aided us in that. I have sent many expeditions to find your fairway lands, but none had returned. And the men who invited us didn't seem to know how to return. It was a true sorrow. What do you plan on doing then? I can tell you that I'm not from this world. I somehow just found myself here. Don't be silly. Only the people of Troy were blessed by the gods to traverse to this land. You and your people may be enlightened, but you are not blessed by the gods. He pointed a finger at me and had a more serious tone. I will make a new expedition, and you will be its head. You will lead us back to your homeland, even if it is the last thing that you will do. You came from the sea, that is certain. I heard you emerge from the forest and know the barbaric tongue of the Red Eyes, but your brown eyes say that you are not as barbaric as them. You have been fooled by them. But I applaud you for learning their foul tongue. It is indeed an honorable act for your dishonorable people. What do you mean, dishonorable people? It saved my life, old man. I don't care who you are. You're not going to manipulate me to go into certain death. If none are returned, even with tech that you have learned from the Brits or the Americans, then I'm not sure there's no end to that ocean. You'll end up on the other side of the continent, if anything else. Better sail along the coast. You'll have better luck. Probably, I said. They saved your life. That may be true. But we will be the ones that will make you prosper. Find your way home with us, and I will grant you any wish you want. Money, woman, fame. That can all be yours if you listen to me. Those savages can only offer you destitution. And Brits or Americans? Who are those people of Brits that you speak of? I know of the American people, but not the Brits. The British, old man, they also speak English. God, you're annoying, aren't you? Listen, I will not heed your I felt a pressure on my neck as my feet could no longer feel the ground. You will listen to me, mortal, or I will throw you into the Hades. It felt as he was going to decapitate me just by crushing my neck with an invisible hand, like he had the force or something. I was barely able to say as I was thrown back onto the ground, panting and wheezing as air filled my lungs again. Wise choice, Ray Aaron. And so just like that, I became a guard of Nova Troya. Up until the new ships are built, I will serve the city and Lord Tros. Even though it seemed like a simple existence, it was anything but. The quality of life was not really on par with anything back home. The food for the guards is bland and tasteless. The quarters where I slept were packed, and sometimes I slept in the towers while on duty. Only when the rare occurrence happened that the night was actually peaceful. As per the nights, oh God, I was alone. The creatures didn't harass me for whatever reason, but went on guard duty, and ever since I came to this godforsaken city where they were relentless. When the sun is about to set, everyone rushes behind the walls. Those who are too late are left for the dead outside, because we don't open the gates for anyone when the allotted time for evacuation is complete. That rule was imposed when some creature-possessed farmer, when he entered the wreaked havoc inside, killing around 50 people before actually being dealt with. Us guards have to keep our eyes open nonstop until the dawn breaks. The creatures that emerge from the forest are unlike anything I'd ever seen. I did witness an array of strange creatures, but nothing too alien or unholy. The biped with 2 black eyes was the scariest thing I had seen up until my 3rd night as a guard. I saw them again, not only that, there were many of them. And those other goddamn creatures. I was trembling just remembering those things. Other than that, tall biped were the bear things, and a thing that is similar to the biped. It walked on 2 legs, but it was freakishly tall with arms that stretched to the floor. It had a human-like face with black sockets for eyes and a constant frown, and it was completely hairless. It would scream into the night with a primal shriek. I remember seeing it for the first time as I thudded towards the wall. Its height was about 2/3 the height, but if it extended its arms, it would be able to reach us with no problem. Quote, the tall men, as the residents of Novus Troya called them, were one of their biggest threats. They aren't that common, but aren't uncommon either. Every week on average a pack of them would emerge. Luckily we would know in advance, as they would shriek and tower over the trees. Seeing the silhouettes of them approaching is terrifying in and of itself. But once we point a light at them, it's even more so. The tall men are one of many. We have the quote crawlers. They are like spider-like creatures that climb up the walls. They are common, but the wall has protective measures against them. And even if a few of them come up, they are killed with just 1 or 2 bullets. Their appearance is like that of a spider, I said. They have a vaguely human face on the front of its body, black sockets for its eyes. It looks vaguely like a face of an infant, actually. It is really disturbing. It has 6 eyes that it's used for its vision. They are located slightly above its face. The body is identical to the spider, though it is around 1 meter tall and is around 2 meters in length. Now for the crown winner of the Miss/Mr. Terrifying thing out here, the Minotaur, or as I like to call them, Bethamin. I probably didn't write it correctly, but if you know, you know. He or she, it is opposed to a monster kin, is not numerous. There's actually only 1 Minotaur out here, and he appears quite rarely. Once in a blue moon. More realistically, from what I've heard, every few years, and when it does, it leaves a trail of death and destruction in its wake. He appears on calm nights when you least expect it. It starts with voices in your head telling you to do all sorts of horrible things. It starts mild and progressively gets worse and worse. People then try to find where he is hiding in order to shoot him. You can't kill him, but you can hurt him so that he just, pisses off. But he hides really well or is too far away. People did find him. Those few who saw him and lived to tell the tale retell the story of being in a meditation pose, sitting on the floor with 1 arm raised next to his face, thumb and index finger completely raised while his middle finger is extended halfway. It has the body of a man, but a head of a bull, or a goat with long horns. If he comes, the casualties are large. Mostly suicides. Men shoot themselves or throw themselves off the wall to stop the voices. Others are seemingly possessed and attack their brothers in arms like savage animals. Most deaths on the wall guards are actually attributed exclusively to the Minotaur. That thing is more dangerous than all the other creatures combined. But tales are told of the original threat. A legend that is worshipped by a small minority of people in the city. Platia. She is the goddess and the protector of the forest. She is either in the form of a fox with 9 tails or a wolf. Sometimes she is depicted in a form of a young black-haired woman with piercing red eyes. Now, she wasn't seen by anyone alive on the guard. Those are only legends. But I believe that, and I am now home and writing this to you. Because of her. It was a day I will remember till I go into the ground. That day was my last as a guard of Nova Troya. I was preparing for my journey and my eventual death, because of the creatures of the forest are like this, and this god knows what is hiding beneath the waves. The night was calm, yet something didn't feel right. The Minotaur came to mind, but I somehow knew it wasn't him. And the night passed uneventfully. I remember as I departed to the ocean on a clear day, yet in moments dark clouds rode in. Clouds so dark that the day was turned into night. Then I remember hearing shots and screaming from the land. The city in the distance erupted into chaos from an unknown force. I remember a flying eagle soared above as rain started pouring and as thunder slammed around us. The waves were taller and taller with each passing moment. The eagle came closer and closer. The crew began shooting at it, but it was useless. The bullets only seemed to irritate the bird, but soon enough the bird turned into a woman with long flowing black hair and eyes as red as blood. She landed on the deck of the ship and started slaughtering the crew. I still remember the screams of the men pleading for mercy as she ripped them apart like a nothing. Then suddenly, apart from the rain and waves, there was silence. Footsteps approached me as I cowered in a corner, soaking wet from the rain. I couldn't even let out a whimper. I was scared beyond comprehension. The footsteps stopped in front of me, and I opened my eyes to see the woman in front of me. She had a loose black gown that fit her black hair and contrasted her pale skin. I stood up. She raised her hand and she said only one word. One word by one person that sounded like it was told by hundreds simultaneously.
Return.
Then with a flick of her wrist, I was thrown overboard by an unseen force. I was constantly bombarded by the waves. Water began filling my lungs and I felt as I was in a whirlpool of water being dragged deeper and deeper below. Then I saw only black and heard no other sounds. I woke up on a boat with people who looked, well, normal. They spoke another language, but it was a language I recognized. I was saved by local Cuban fishermen in the Bermuda Triangle of all places, which was on the other side of the world where I originally fell into the hole in that small cave. Now, I never had any really close family, so my disappearance wasn't immediately noticed. But I decided to take the chance and rebuild my life. I changed my name and my identity. I live far away from my birthplace now. If I were ever to tell my story to anyone, they would call me insane. You two probably think that as well. But heed my word. If you see any strange openings or any strange feelings in certain places, leave and avoid them. It might be an adventure, but it might as well be an involuntary adventure. If you seek such thrills, I can't stop you really. I can tell you they have a pattern, and that they are cleverly placed around the world. That's as much as I know. Be careful out there, all of you, wherever you are.